Maps with Adam Engst. This is MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is supported by MacVoices After Dark. Uncensored, off-topic, and always off the wall. MacVoices After Dark is available as a benefit to our Patreon subscribers. Sign up at patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is going to be a show that is sort of done at the request of our guest because he said he wanted to talk about this. I'm not sure where we're going to go with this, but we're going to have some fun. Adam Engst is back.
And maybe we'll find our way back because we're talking about
maps.
Thank you. There we go.
Maps. Okay, so Adam said in the last time he was here, after we closed out the show, he said he wanted to come back and talk about maps. I don't know what kind of maps we're talking about, Adam, so enlighten me.
Well, I mean, maps are interesting. I mean, I assume you use Google Maps and Apple's Maps, yes, when you're driving.
Of course.
I mean, we all do. We all have these insane things in our pockets that give us, map to the world. I mean, it's actually kind of amazing if you think about it. I mean, go back. I mean, maps used to be a really, really big deal. I mean, there were very few of them, for one. They were both inaccurate and essential at the same time. I mean, if you were a sea captain in the 1700s, your maps were pretty damn important. And yet, not so much 1700s. It turns out the whole, there be dragons here, or here be dragons, that turns out to be a bit of an urban myth. In fact, no actual maps say that. One globe does, but no maps. And so, but it was still one of those things where people were busy trying to figure out the world. And we've come such an incredibly long way. And I don't want to say I don't want to say anything bad about it, but it's people don't quite realize all the things that become possible with modern mapping services. And so that's when, I do a fair amount with maps because as a runner and as a race director, I'm constantly trying to see how far things are or tell people where to go or try to give people directions on a trail where, it's literally turn left at the big tree. It's not street signs are easy, man. It's when you come to an intersection in the woods and you have to know that you want to take the slight left down the hill, not up the hill, that kind of thing. So I just basically started, kind of digging into all the mapping stuff that I use in this article, for this TidBITS article and just, kind of shared and explored and, talked about it all.
I love the big tree example because, when I was on the road for business, if you had an appointment with someone, that was always the big bugaboo. First of all, you didn't know how long to how long to allow to get there. So you ended up wasting a lot of time. But more important, inevitably, there would always be, just turn left at the big tree and you'll see my house, 2 miles up on the left. And it's like, you get there and you're kind of expecting like a lone tree. And instead you've got, 40 trees and you could argue that one is bigger than the other, but I'm not sure that this is the right one. And so the amount of time we save with this, I mean, forget just directions, just the idea that you have a decent map that you can follow when you're driving or running or walking is huge.
And it really does. I mean, it is interesting. So, as someone who runs and bikes and hikes and things like that, if you're on a bike, for instance, it's sort of easy to have your phone available. The mounts aren't so great on handlebars, but it's possible. But biking is the same thing. If you say, it's a gorgeous weekend day, I want to bike 40 miles today. Well, how do you find 40 miles, a 40-mile ride? You don't just go out and ride for 20 miles and then turn around, because that would be boring. And not to mention the fact that, you're going to probably go, oh, this looks interesting, I want to go this way. And so you usually want to find somewhere that takes you to, in a big loop, has a stop for lunch, that kind of stuff. And so you'll use a service to map out a route. And running, it's not quite quite such a big deal because you can't go as far. But with running, again, particularly if you're on trails, you're just not there. There aren't directions. I mean, like, you might know I can go to this state forest, and then there will be trails. But how do I get an 8-mile run out of that? And so what all of this kinds of services that I'm talking about help you do is either beforehand or during, help you find your way. So beforehand, the big one that I've gotten really fond of, I talk about, is it's called On the Go Map. And it looks like Google Maps or Apple Maps, right? You open it up and it's a webpage, on the go map.com. But the trick is that you can map a route. So you click, and then you start clicking around where you think you want to go, and it tells you how far it is. There's even an elevation map at the bottom if you want. So you can see, oh yeah, maybe I don't want to go this way because that's the really big hill. And so that gives you, that allows you to say, oh yeah, this is the way I want to go, and this is the distance I want to go. And you figure that out ahead of time. And then you can share that with other people. So that's part of the problem with Apple Maps and Google Maps, right? Is they'll tell you where you are and how to get to where you're going. And you could share like the destination with someone, and their version of Apple Maps or Google Maps would tell them how to get there. But if you're doing a 40-mile ride or an 8-mile run, good luck trying to share that, because that's an arbitrary loop or an arbitrary course. It's not the sort of thing which has a fixed start and finish that the service then calculates for you.
Never really thought about it from exactly that angle. I mean, I'm always interested in, I know where I want to go most of the time. Right. And, so the obvious thing is let's get me there the fastest, most efficient way. Right. And, and so you can, now I know there's some things like Waze, where it's like I can avoid toll roads and do different things like that, which is great. And of course, the traffic things. But I never really thought about saying I need to map out a 40-mile ride or run or whatever.
Well, or think about, like, you go to a national, you're on vacation, you go to a national park, and, you pull up at the parking lot and you want to go for a hike. So what you do is you walk up to their kiosk or whatever, and you start looking at the map that will tell you, oh, you could take the Bear Trail, which is 2.5 miles, or you could take the Eagle Trail, which is 5.6 miles. And it looks like the Eagle Trail connects into the Wolf Trail, that sort of thing. And so what these services let you do is kind of tap into that kind of stuff ahead of time, and they let you do it wherever you want, as opposed to what other people have specified. So, maybe beyond the Bear Trail, Wolf Trail, and Eagle Trail. So, in fact, a service that I'll mention in the article is there's an app called Alltrails.com, and it's an Alltrail. It's an app for your iPhone and everything like that. And you can just like pull up a park or something, and it will show you all the loops that people have identified as something you might want to do. And you can just pick one of those, and then it will direct you on those. So that's sort of the same thing. For me, it's more about, like, again, I'm planning a run on the weekend with my friends. We want to do 10 miles. Okay, we're going to start here. Where do we go to get 10 miles? It's not a trivial thing, because you want it to be an interesting route. You want it to have some variety. You want to avoid big roads, all those kinds of things. And so it's manual, but you want to be able to go through and kind of map this stuff out ahead of time. And that's what the on-the-go map sites are good for. And there's actually a bunch of them: MapMyRide, MapMyRun, GMap Pedometer. But on-the-go map is my favorite one at the moment. Just because it makes it easy. That, with all these things, like, let's imagine you're trying to map out this route, and you want it to be 10 miles, and you don't want to have to, like, draw straight lines between all the roads, or like all that, or what if a road curves? And so they all have features where they'll say follow the road or follow the known trail. And so you just sort of click, and it makes the shortest route that takes you from click to click, which is, again, much, much easier when you just want to say, hey, give me 10 miles, in 5 or 6 clicks, that it goes in this rough neighborhood.
This is one of the great things I think about the technology we have now, because you have a very specialized use for maps, one that I can't think. I mean, no offense, but I can't think of a reason that I would need to concoct a route. If
You're not
anything,
an
I'd say, okay,
explorer, is what you're saying.
well, no, I didn't say that. No, but I mean, so if I leave my house, go down to the park, make a lap around the park and come back, it would be nice maybe to know how long it is without having to actually walk it and let my Apple Watch tell me. But at the same time, it would never have occurred to me to say, okay, I want to leave my house and I want to go on a mile walk or a 2 mile walk. And, if I turn, left on one street, I'll see this, and turn right on another street, I'll see that. So this seems like a very specialized kind of use, but the technology
It's
supports it.
specialized, but I will say it's extremely common for anyone who runs or bikes or hikes. So if I came to visit you, for instance, and said, got up in the morning and said, hey, Chuck, where should I go for a run? You'd probably go, well, there's a nice park down that way.
Yeah.
And I'd say, how far is it? and how do I get there? And so what we would do then is we'd pull up one, on the go map, and I'd say, okay, we're here and I want to go to this park. You say, okay, click, 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 click. And looks like that's going to be about, 3. I actually want to get 6 in. So what if I go over here? And you go, oh man, you don't want to go to that part of the world. And so I'd send it over to the other direction and that kind of thing until we'd have a row. Now, here's another, so that's really good. But then you still, like, if you're in an unfamiliar area, you don't want to be sitting there like kind of literally referring to this map, or like trying to follow it on your phone. I mean, that's what Google Maps and Apple's Maps are really good at, is they give you directions. And so there's actually a service called RunGo, which is unique as far as I know, which actually gives you voice directions on foot. And this is kind of cool because, I mean, it can do it, obviously if you're on roads, it's pretty easy. Like, it can see every turn and knows the names of the turns, but it can also do it for trails. So if you say, oh yeah, you go into the park, and then you go into the park, and then there's this big kind of loopy thing around the outside, and you take that halfway across, and then you'll see another exit out of this other park. That's the sort of thing that RunGo can actually provide you explicit directions on, if someone were to set it up ahead of time. Because again, if it's exit the park at the big tree on the other side, there's no way of knowing that easily. So that's where, helping people kind of get into usually it's more of a wilderness area, frankly, and be able to navigate with custom instructions, like turn at the big tree, or go down this hill until you hit a stream at the bottom, then you'll cross the stream and turn right. That's how trails work, right? They don't have names on them. They don't have things that you can identify in any other way. So RunGo is a very cool app that just works on your Apple Watch or your phone, and actually talks to you as you're walking or running.
I was just about to ask you, how it delivers the information.
Yeah.
But so how does it get the information? Because it's not like you have.
You do have to set it up. So in that case, you would. So when let's say you use, I don't think Workouts does this, but Strava, for instance, which is a very common kind of social media workout-based service. When you run something and record it with Strava or bike it, whatnot, it makes a map route, right? And you can export that as a file in a format called GPX. And that's a standardized, kind of location format. So you can import your GPX into RunGo, and then you go through, and everywhere there's a turn, and I said it identifies a number of the turns automatically, but then you can add them, and then you can actually put in custom directions. So you wouldn't do this for a one-off, right? It's too much work for a one-off. But if you might do it, you might even do it for a one-off if you were like, it was something that was going to be fairly long and you didn't want to refer to, you didn't want to be constantly referring to your phone while you were running or biking or walking. But where it's really good is then you can share that with other people. So you can say, hey, if you want to go do this, fabulous 4-mile run that I found in the trails, here's the way to do it. And I don't have to get to give you those 17, steps of directions of what trees and streams and, Y intersections to look for.
So when you're setting this up, so let's say you come to my house and you're going to go to the park and then take your left and go out into the field. I mean, are you running this or walking this and it's tracking you, so it knows that at that particular point you say, I want to turn here?
Yep,
is that the way you're getting the information?
It knows it because it's running on a device, your phone or your watch, that has a GPS. So it knows where you are. And it knows roughly how fast you're moving because it's been watching you move all along. This is the one thing that RunGo doesn't do super well, which is what it tries to do is, how in a car, maps will say, in half a mile, turn left. It doesn't attempt to tell you in 10 seconds, turn left, but, how fast you're going affects when that half mile is. But in a car, you can kind of tell, that, I can see that, my freeway intersection's coming up in half a mile, no problem. Or, it'll say turn left in 100 feet if you're in a city and that kind of thing. Well, on trails, it doesn't really help to be given distances because you often can't see them, right? If it's around a corner, or you just may have no idea. And so what it does is it tries to figure out how fast you're going and then how far it is to say, in 40 seconds, turn right at the big tree. Now, the problem with that is it's not accurate as it might be. So for me, it usually says in 40 seconds, turn right at the big tree when I'm looking at the big tree, right in front of me. I'm like, no, I'm going to turn here. It's just, it's sort of it's something I've noticed and obviously I tested this on courses that I knew really well, so that I wasn't going to test it with somewhere I'd never been before. But so I was like, oh yeah, it's a little slow on the uptake. So you have to take that into account. But it's an awfully neat feature, and we did something locally with it where we had a bunch of courses in various state forests and national forests, and by having the RunGo instructions, people felt a lot more confident about going out there, particularly women, frankly. That it's a little scary to go out into the wilderness on trails where you've never been before, and to not have some kind of really solid sense of where you are, as well as where you are on the map.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I should note, a lot of these places don't have very good cellular reception because they're wilderness. That's sort of the point of them. So the beauty of RunGo is it works offline because you load the route onto your watch or your phone. So and the GPS chip doesn't need cellular access. It just needs to be able to see the satellites. So that works even if you have no cellular reception at all.
I have to admit, I don't think I realized that.
Oh yeah, that's a really cool thing.
I never thought about that. So I can turn off my cellular and the GPS still works.
And there's a useful little tip for people. If you ever are in a situation where cellular is non-existent or very weak, put your phone in airplane mode. And the reason why you want to do that is because you'll save a lot of power. The battery, it's constantly looking for cellular. Now, when I say that, and actually it's an interesting question because I actually don't know offhand if airplane mode turns off the GPS as well. It might. I'd have to look that up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Because frankly, I'm thinking about when I get in the plane.
Yeah, you turn on airplane mode. So
yeah, you turn on airplane mode, but I don't think I've ever looked at the map or where I was. I mean, the airlines themselves. No, but you're pulling it from the airline. I was going to say the airlines have the maps usually that show if you're going cross country. That okay, now I'm over Utah, and as to what your ETA is. But they're probably pulling that from the plane, not from.
It looks to me like airplane mode does not turn off GPS, from what I'm reading.
Okay.
So it may have done that at one time, actually, from what I can tell. and then it changed at some point in like iOS 10 or iOS 11 or something. Oh yeah, here we go. Mac Observer. iOS 8.2 and earlier, airplane mode would turn off all existing radio systems, but 8.3 and later in GPS stays on. So yeah, so a useful thing. But yeah, when cellular service is weak or non-existent, the radio is just constantly seeking, and that's a high power mode, and will eat your battery.
Interesting. Are there any other use cases we're missing for this?
Well, so again, there's a lot of cases where, again, maybe this is, I mean, you live in a more urban area than I do, but it is common around here for mapping services to not be quite right, or to give instructions for again, one of the places I go fairly frequently, there's a road you do not take. It is a seasonal road, and even in the season, I mean the warm season, in other words, it's not actually passable unless you have a very high four-wheel drive truck. And people every year end up trying to get to the parking lot at this trailhead by going up a road where you can't get through. And there's puddles that are 3-4 feet deep. And it's just not something you can do unless you have a serious off-road vehicle. And so, so that's the kind of thing, again, where if you're providing directions, you're going to make sure that you tell people, don't trust your mapping service. Here, use this map instead.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And while I don't think of myself as an urban dweller by any means, Adam, I see your point. That because I can think of not having to drive too far, and there would be areas that some of that could apply.
Yeah, and it's certainly common. I mean, maps aren't right all the time, right? I mean, that's one of the issues with them is that correct is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. So, one of the things that I also was talking about in this article is that it is not unthinkable to run into mistakes in maps. I don't know if have you ever had any like that, where you're like, that doesn't seem right, or
sure.
Something.
Sure.
You can report these, and actually the companies do fix them, which is impressive. They don't fix all the other bugs we find, but they do fix map problems. And so one of the things that I ran into, which I hadn't known about, is apparently a lot of mapping services, not Apple or Google, but a lot of these other kinds of services, rely on something called Openstreetmap, which is basically it's an open source map of the world. So this is kind of cool. I mean, you don't have to be one of the big boys to actually build a service based on mapping data because of OpenStreetMap. But because OpenStreetMap is essentially open source, you can edit it. So you can go in and fix stuff, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's sort of neat to be able to just be seeing something and say, oh, wow, I could change that. So, I was actually ran into a situation where Cornell renamed some parts of the university. There's something had been called the Cornell Plantations, and when they decided to rename it the Cornell Botanic Gardens, and several roads changed as relation to that. And so people in this particular department at Cornell are a little sensitive about using their name wrong. Actually, they're really sensitive about it. So at some point, I sent one of my contacts a map, just a real, hey, what about this kind of, informal thing? And she kind of flipped out a little bit at me because you're like, oh, you still got Plantations Road there. And I'm like, sorry, this is not my service. Sort of like, it's not my fault.
Like your fault, you can go in and change it.
Yeah, right. And so then that was what got me curious about this. So I started poking around. I'm like, oh, you can change this. And I did. And it was kind of fun. I literally went in and, I mean, it was so cool to have the equivalent of, again, Google Maps, and to go in and click on a road name and change it. I'm like, ooh, the power.
Yeah, that's in some ways that's a little scary, Adam.
I presume there's some, like Wikipedia, I assume there's some level of editing editing checks on the back end. So
Yeah, I would hope so. I'm constantly amazed though at how quickly like Apple Maps and Google Maps update.
yeah,
Not long in the grand scheme of things, not long ago, they started developing what was a farm that's behind my house. So I guess I am moving into a little more urban area, but that's beside the point.
yeah,
But and by the time they had the roadway down, it was showing up on directions.
yeah.
So instead of leaving my driveway and go to a particular destination, instead of turning left, it told me to turn right. And it's like, well, yeah, there a road now where there wouldn't have been not long ago. And I don't ever. Well, no, that's not true. But I don't know that Apple or Google Maps have been driving my neighborhood. So I don't know
I
where
mean,
they pull that stuff.
it's well, so a lot of transportation departments actually would be uploading that information
Yeah.
I mean, because this is one of the questions with self-driving cars, right? Is how do they know about construction? And so the answer is that a lot of times transportation departments that are doing the construction would be saying, there's construction here, and oh, look, now it's done. And the road is now different in this way. Because, right, if you had to drive every change, it would take too long. You'd never know about stuff. But there are some interesting ones that you get to. For instance, like this was a kind of funny story where Glenn Fleischman, who does the Mac 911 column for Macworld, got a query from a guy who worked in West Virginia in a county that had put in 911 service. And when you do 911 service, every road has to have a name. And in rural areas, that wasn't necessarily true before, or every address. And so, like when I was growing up, my address was RR1, Rural Route 1. And it wasn't there. I mean, there was a road name, but it wasn't in our address. And so, when they put in 911 service at some point, which my father was sort of in charge of because he was the mailman, that everyone had to get an address. So we became 236 Brigham Road instead. And so, but anyway, so this happens in West Virginia, and basically the guy can't figure out how to get this information to Apple because Apple's not updating maps to accommodate all the changes. And we actually, by talking to people I knew, and finally got in contact with the appropriate someone in the appropriate maps team, and was able to make that connection so that the county in West Virginia was able to provide Apple with all the new data, and instantly maps updates to have all that information. But it wasn't quite as automatic as we might have liked.
Adam is back in the next edition of MacVoices to talk more about maps and mapping technology and the benefits that we see, sometimes without even realizing it. We talk about longitude and latitude and why that is being replaced in some cases by some alternatives and why they may or may not be catching on. That's all next time on MacVoices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.